We're now on Daf Samach Aleph Amid Beis. Lomali, why did the Torah have to add those two extra words, B'Eretz Canaan? Shmamino says, Rabbi Meir Litnai Kofel Udiyasa. Moshe adds these two words, B'Eretz Canaan, to teach us that you have to be kofel the Tanai if you want to validate the Tanai. Because if Moshe Rabbeinu had not been kofel the Tanai and give the negative side as well as the positive, then Bnei Gad and Bnei Ruvain would take Eretz Gilad completely, even if they wouldn't be Mekayim the Tanai. Which means that the Tanai is Batel and the Maisa is Kayim, which opens up an entire sugya unto itself. That's, if I'm not mistaken, Ksuba Staf Nun Vav. What happens if the Tanai is not valid? Tanai is Batel, we say Maisa Kayim. Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel, what would be his response to Rabbi Meir's argument? He holds that you don't need a Tanai Kofel, but nevertheless, Elo Kosav Rachmana B'Eretz Canaan, had the Torah not added, had Moshe Rabbeinu not added those two extra words, if he just would have said V'nochazu b'sochachem, I would have thought that what does the Torah mean when it says V'nochazu b'tochachem? It means that they could only have rights to a chelek in Eretz Gilad. They have no rights whatsoever to inherit, together with the rest of the Shvatim, in Eretz Canaan itself. Aval b'Eretz Canaan klalo, lo means lo yinchalu. So this was the Havamina without, had Moshe Rabbeinu not added the words b'Eretz Canaan. The Havamina would have been that if they don't go chalutzim, then they don't have any rights to Eretz Canaan. In other words, they participated, Bnei Gad and Bnei Ruvain, in the conquer of Gilad. Here they lived up to their obligation like any other Sheva. Now they have a special obligation, a unique obligation that goes beyond the other Shvatim to go in Chalutzim to Eretz Canaan. If they fail to do so, then they forfeit their rights to Eretz Canaan. All they have rights to is in Eretz Gilad. And we'll see as we go along whether or not in Eretz Gilad they have to divvy it up with the other Shvatim. L'chor, yes. But they cannot inherit even a parcel of land in Eretz Canaan because they didn't fulfill that condition. Therefore, the Torah had to add the words B'Eretz Canaan to tell me that if they don't go and participate in the conquer of Eretz Canaan, then their situation will be equal to that of all of the Shvatim, and they will inherit Al-Pi Goro. For Rabbi Meir, how will Rabbi Meir counter argument against the logic of Rabbi Chanina? And he says, I'm going to add the word v'nochazu. V'nochazu b'sochacham kol heicha de isluhu mashma. It means b'sochacham together with the rest of the Shvatim. Any place that the rest of the Shvatim will be nochel through Gorol, they, Bnei Gad and Bnei Ruvain, will be part of that nachla. Therefore, the Torah didn't have to say and add, when I say the Torah, I mean Moshe, add the words B'Eretz Canaan, unless the Torah is trying to teach us the requirement of Tanai Kofel. And now, the Gemara is going to bring a brisa here in which Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel presents his entire thesis. And in this thesis, which we're about to learn in the brisa, Rabbi Chanina gives a mashal. And we're going to work very hard to try to see how the mashal parallels the nimshal. And they fit like a glove. We're going to do a kind of a matching exam. Tanya, we learned to the Brayso Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel. Mashal l'mad over dome. Moshe Rabbeinu's Tanai should be compared to the following. Li'adam shayu machalekes nechasu bonav. He has 3 sons, and in his lifetime he's divvying up his estate. The Yomi declares, Ploni b'ni, my first son, Yirash Sada Plonus. He'll get that son. He's got 3 sados, this guy, and he has 3 sons. Uploni b'ni and his second son, Yirash Sada Plonis will get the other Sada. Uploni b'ni, will he get the third Sada? That depends. If Yitain Masayim Zuz, if he'll offer a pitzud to his other brothers, his two brothers, of Masayim Zuz v'Yiresh Sada Plonis, then he gets the third Sada. I get the impression here, I don't know, nobody says this, that the third Sada was worth a little bit more than the first two. Anyway, V'im lo Yitain, but if he doesn't fulfill his responsibility and fork over 200 Zuz, Yiresh im Echav b'shar nechasim. In other words, he'll get an equal share, even in the two Sados that were given to his two brothers. And the Brisa now is going to explain how this mashal will explain the nimshal in Bnei Gad Bnei Reuven. Mi garam lo lirashim echa b'shar nechasav. Who is the one who undermined the third brother's rights to the third Sada, such that now he has to divvy it up with the other brothers and get an equal share? Is Kfelo Garamla. It's only because of the Tanai Kafel. Now, it's a little bit interesting because Reb Chanina is not the one who waves the flag of Tanai Kafel, right? In other words, at the beginning, the father said I think the word he here refers to the third brother, will fork over Masayim Zuz, and then he will inherit the third field. We could have understood that if he wouldn't fulfill his Tanai and fork over the Masayim Zuz, then he will only get a portion in the third Sada, 1/3 of the third Sada. He would not get anything in the first two Sados. And certainly, he would not inherit the entire third Sada. Meaning, he doesn't have an argument to say, well, let me get that portion of the third Sada that corresponds to the portions of the first two Sados. But now, the father was kofel the Tanai. And he says that im lo yite masayim zuz, if you don't fork over the 200 zuz, then yachlok im echav b'shar nechas. So again, if not for the kfelus hatnai, argues Reb Chanina, then we would have assumed that if the third brother does not fulfill his obligation, then he will not be able to get a chelik in the first two sados. And therefore, by adding the Tanai Kaful, the father is explicating that in event that the brother does not fulfill his condition of fork over the Masayim Zuz, he will, in fact, inherit his portion in the first two sados. Now we get to the Nimshal. Moshe Rabbeinu gave Eretz Yisrael, divided up Eretz Yisrael to 10 Shvatim. Like the father who divvied up the first two sadas to his first two sons. As far as Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven are concerned, Moshe Rabbeinu gave them Eretz Gilad on condition that they would go chalutzim to Milchama again in Eretz Canaan. And that's similar to the third sada that the father wants to designate for his third son on the condition that he will fork over the Masayim Zuz. Now, we could have understood that if the Tanai would not be fulfilled and Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven would not go chalutzim l'mulcham Eretz Canaan, then they don't get any portion of Eretz Canaan. And not only that, they don't even get a portion of Eretz Gilad, which is keneged the portion that allotted them in Eretz Canaan. So all they do is they participate in an equal division amongst 12 Shvatim in Eretz Gilad. Says Rabbi Chanina, but the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu is kofel the Tanai That's Machadesh, that even if Bnei Gad and Bnei Rav will not be Makayim the Tanai, nevertheless, they will be included in the Gorol of the 12 Shvatim divvying up Eretz Canaan. They will have no special rights, obviously, in Eretz Gilead. Frek the Gemara, the mashal doesn't fit the Nimshal. For Holo Damya mashal, the mashal in the Brisa does not fit Lamas Nisan to the words of Rabbi Chanina in the Mishnah. Hasam Kitani in the Mishnah, it says that if it wasn't a Tanai Kafel, Yesh b'mashma shafilu b'eretz Canaan lo yinchu. The Mishnah seems to say that if not for the Kfelus HaTanai, in event that Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven would not fulfill their responsibility to go chalutzim, then they will not get a portion in Eretz Canaan at all, because they were most Eretz Canaan. And for sure, they wouldn't get a special portion in Eretz Gilead. Alma, what do we see from our Mishnah? That Kfela li Eretz Gilead nami mahan. Let's see if we can figure out that line. Kfela li Eretz Gilead nami mahani. The doubling up of the condition gives them rights to be nochel in Eretz Gilead. Again, if not for the Kfelus HaTanai, they wouldn't be nochel neither in Eretz Canaan nor in Eretz Gilead. Oh, it's not like what I said before, that they'd get an equal portion in Eretz Gilead. No, they would get no portion in Eretz Gilead. But the Kfelus HaTanai, according to Rabbi Chanina, gives them rights, even in an event that they don't fulfill the Tanai, to get their portion in Eretz Gilead. But Hacha, in the case of the Brisa, the Mashal, Ketani, Rabbi Chanina says the following: Mi Garam, who caused the Ben Ashlishi Lirash im Echav B'Shar Nechasim in the first two Sados, they will have rights to get. He will have rights to get 1/3 of the other two Sados. Kfela Garma. Alma, you see, from the language Sha'ar Nechasim, that Kfela L'Shar Nechasim Hu Dekamahani, that this extra Kfelus of the Tanai, according to Reb Chanina, is meaningful, is beneficial, only with regard to the first two Sados, that the third brother who did not fulfill his condition, he gets they divvy up the portion together with his first two brothers in the first two Sados. But in the third Sada, he gets a right to 1/3 of the third Sada, even if the father had not specified that. So it seems that according to Reb Chanina, even though in the Nimshal, the Bnei Gad would get a portion of the land in Eretz Gilead, because there they fulfilled their obligation to conquer Eretz Gilead. But if not for the Kfeil Tanai, and I should say even without the Kfeil Tanai, they would at least get Gilead, which is parallel to the first two Sados. So we see that there's an incongruity between Rabbi Chanina's words in our Mishnah and his words in the Brisa. And the Gemara answers, Lo kasha ha makami d'nemalei Rabbi Meir v'nochazu v'ha lebasa d'nemalei Rabbi Meir v'nochazu. When Rabbi Chanina says in our Mishnah that without the Kfel Tanai, Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven would even get a portion of Eretz Gilead, that's before Rabbi Meir said to him that if the Torah had in mind to be Machadesh, that even without the Kiyum Tanai, they should get a nachlu together with the other shvatim, then it would have been enough to say v'nochazu b'sochachem. And Rabbi Chanina thought that according to Rabbi Meir, the entire pasuk is saying that. So Rabbi Chanina responds by saying, if not for the pasuk v'nochazu b'tocha b'eretz Canaan, we would have thought that without the kiyum tanai, they shouldn't get any nachla anywhere. And that's Rabbi Meir in our Mishnah. But Rabbi Chanina, I'm sorry, that's Rabbi Chanina and Amish. But Ha and Rabbi Chanina and the Mashal, the Brisa, that's Labasa, the Nemele, Rabbi Meir, V'nocha Zubetochen. After Rabbi Meir said that for this Chiddush, it would be enough to say V'nocha Zubetochen, and therefore the words B'eretz Canaan are only coming to teach me that you need there's a requirement of Tanai Kafel. And on that level, on that stage in the development of the Masu Matan, Rabbi Chanina gives his mashal that just like the Ben Ashlishi, if not for the fact that the father said it explicitly, he would be nochel only in the third sada, he would be completely booted out and excluded from the first two sadas. So too, if not for the fact that Torah added the words B'eretz Canaan, B'nei Gad B'nei Ruvain would only be nochel b'sochachem, meaning in Eretz Gilad, but not in Eretz Canaan, and therefore the Torah had to add B'eretz Canaan to teach me that they would get a nachla together with the Shar Shvatim in Eretz Canaan. Gemara asks the following kasha: B'shleim Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir holds. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to go through, I call it a skira, and investigate many psukim in Tanakh where the Torah says both A and if not A, B. And all that is going to be a support for Rabbi Meir, because Rabbi Meir holds that you have to add the if not B, because we don't apply the principle of Michal Lav and Tashmein. Bishleim the Rabbi Meir Hainu D'Chsiv. We understand with regard to HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaking to Cain after he killed Hevel in this week's parsha. Im Teitiv Sietz. Lo if you'll do better and you'll do tshuva, then you'll be makabel schar. If you don't do tshuva and straighten out your ways, then puranios muchana lava, you'll be punished. If not for the kefal tanai, we see that this would not work. We need the kefal tanai, and that fits beautifully and supports Rabbi Meir. Elo Rabbi Chanina lamali. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu find it necessary to be kofel? And the answer is, and this is going to be the pattern throughout our sugya, that when the Torah says this will happen if the Torah doesn't add the second half of it, if not, etc., then you might think, well, it won't be this, but it'll be something in the middle. It'll be like parva. I would have thought, imtative agra. If you'll mend your ways and rectify yourself, then you'll get schar. But im lo tativ lo agvel adina. You know what? You won't get schar and you won't be punished. Kamash Malon, the Kfeil Sadvar teaches me that if he doesn't improve his ways, he'll be punished. I find this Gemara very difficult to understand because what's the Havamida that a man kills his brother and he's not going to be punished? I mean, now we have another pasuk. This is Avram Avinu speaking to Eliezer to send his Eved to bring back a wife for his son Yitzchak. When Avram Avinu was mashpia his Eved Eliezer not to take a wife from Bnos Canaan, and he says that the shvua is conditional on Shalo Yelech Mikodem El Mishpachta. That, you'll be held guilty, Eliezer, if you go first to the Bnos Canaan rather than to my Mishpach. And then Avram found it necessary to add Oz Tinokem El Lasi. Kisavo El Mishpachti, Vim Lo Yitnu L'chava Yisa Naki Me'el Lasi. Which means that he had to be kofil the Tanai and say Oz Tinaki Me'olasi. Had he not been kofil the Tanai explicitly, then the shvur would be chal on Eliezer, even if he'd be Mekayim the Tanai. And here there's a long discussion going through the Seder Apsukim. I don't think we'll have time for that today. El Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel Lomali. Why was it necessary for Avram to explicate that if they won't give him a wife and they won't agree to submit to the marriage, then he's parted from the shvua. Since he said the shvua, he was told the shvua bim lo yelech tchilo mishpachas Avraham. So it sounds like that if he was Makayim the shvua, then he's parted from the shvua. Why do you have to explicate and be mefarish that in lo yitnu lo isha you parted min shvua? Itzer. Salke taitakamina hecha denicha ledide. Oh, this is a whole lumps. Hecha denicha la ledida. If she herself is willing to marry Yitzchak, v'lo nicha luliditu, but the family objects. Maisi bal korcheu. Eliezer would have to bring her back against their will. And if he doesn't do that, then he'll get hit with the shvua. Is kamash malon if Avram says, "Oz tinokim elasi im lo yitnu." If the bnei mishpacha are not willing to give their approval, then you're naki mishvua. You're completely exempt from the shvua. And by the way, now that the Gemara is mentioning the shvua of Avram, the Gemara adds another thing. It says in the pasuk of Lot Sover Isha, if she rejects the marriage, then once again, Renikisa Mishvasi Zoslamali. Itzrich. Gemara says we need it. I would have said if the Bnei Mishpacha give their approval, but she refuses, then Naisi Balkocha, maybe Eliezer would in that case have to bring her against her will, grab her by the hair, so to speak. And if he doesn't do so, then in Chalal Mashvua, the whammy is Chalan. Kov Mashmalon, that's what Avram wanted to be Mechadish in this Lashon, that even if she decides to refuse the marriage, then he's exempt from the Shvua. The Torah promises you all the brachos that were enumerated in Parshas Vayikra Chaf Vav of Bechukosa, if you fulfill the will of God. And then it says, well, if you won't fulfill the will of God, then you'll get all these clothes. So we understand that very well according to Rabbi Meir, because we don't have the principle of Michal Lavat Hashem, we need kfelus. Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel Lamali, why does he have to mention both sides? It's again a very strange habit that if we don't go and follow in the ways of God, then we don't get any punishment. I have a feeling that this punishment has to do something with Olam Haba. Anyway, it's called Mashmalon. Therefore, the Torah wants to tell us with these extra psukim that if we don't go in the ways of Chukas Hashem, there will be cursed. The Navi Yeshaya at the beginning of Sefer Yeshaya says to Am Yisrael, Im tovu ushmatam tuv haaretz tochelu. If you'll have a desire for the land and for the fulfillment of the mitzvahs in the land, then you'll be granted all the gifts of Eretz tuv haaretz. But then it says, V'im tum asu marisem cherev tu kolu. Why did Yeshayahu? I know you have to go ahead with the kfelus and say, well, if you will not have that love for the land, but rather tima'enu, is then cherev tu kolu. Well, why was it necessary to be kofel l'tanai? So according to Rabbi Meir, it's very good. El Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel Lamali, and the Gemara says it's Sal Kedat Chamina. We could have interpreted that im tovu, if you love and desire to fulfill the will of God, then you'll receive tovu. Im tima'enu, if you are not interested in fulfilling the will of God, lo tovu lo ra, you won't get schar and you won't get evil. Kamashmal Torah in Yeshayahu wants to tell us that if they don't oblige the word of God and his commands, they will be punished. What is the meaning of the klala here on the top of Samach Beis? Cherev to ukolu. It sounds like, the charavos will swallow something. Omarava milcha dlal nisa, which is very thick salt. V'namua, and bread, the sari akusha, that's made of sa'orim, and it's very tough. Barley bread is much more dry. Ubitzole and onions. The Omer Mar pas purne chareva b'melech ubetzolim koshem leguf kicharevos. So basically, the klola is that if we don't fulfill the will of God, then we'll end up with food that's salty, with like a heavy kind of salt, with barley bread that's very tough, eating onions. And we know that paspurne, a large dry bread, is chareva. B'melech ubetzolim. So you're eating this pas chareva together with melech ubetzolim, koshem leguf kicharevos. Okay, this is where we're going to stop. And again, the Gemara is going to now continue their analysis of the mikros, all of which seem to have the kfelus and support Rabbi Meir. But then we're going to have certain psukim where the Torah did not add the negative, and those psukim will support the shita of Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel. So with that, I wish you a great Shabbos.